Good afternoon. I think we lost a few people because we probably all need a bit of a break, but we'll make sure we have a really impactful session here. My name is Jennifer Gibbs. I am the Chief Data Officer at CIBC. Very excited to be here with a bunch of fellow data geeks. Also, shout out to my team. And also excited to talk about this topic, which really is what the relationship between data management practices and AI. And we've touched a lot on that already throughout this session. Thrilled to be on stage here and moderating with fellow data leaders. So I want to do a quick introduction of each of our panelists. We have Christine Filer, VP of Enterprise Data Strategy and Governance from RBC. And we have Christopher Hayes, Director of Data Science and Visualization from Aviso Wealth. And we have Gord, also known as George, I'm told, but I can call you Gord today, the Director of Data and AI Governance at GreenShield. So welcome, everyone. So this topic is near and dear to my heart. And one of the first questions I was going to ask Christine has to do with the impact of the hype of AI on data governance practices, decisions, and investments. My experience has been that sometimes the stuff that is called quote unquote sexy, like AI, kind of overshadows and overpowers some of the stuff that I actually think is also sexy, which is data management. I'm actually finding that not to be the case right now. And I'm really curious about what your experience has been, Christine, and whether the hype of AI is helping or hindering data investments, advancing data management in companies today.
Yeah, thank you. Can you hear me? So I think first, the hype is warranted, right? I've been in this industry a long time in business and tech and data roles, 30 plus years, and it is the potential and promise of this technology is huge. It's like really nothing we've ever seen before, and the pace that it's moving is also pretty fast, right? So the hype, I think, is hindering maybe a little bit in, I think Preeti mentioned it, that the shift in boards, there's FOMO, right? There is fear of missing out in the business, and so they want to move fast. They are feeling like they need to do something, and it's still at its infancy. And so I think we have to remember that it is still automation, and we still know how to do good risk management, right? So whether it's BCP or data management, tech, information security, all of those things still apply. And we also have to acknowledge that we are learning through this process, right? As we learn about different models and different patterns of stringing this together, that all of those might have a slightly different inherent risk. And we always want to move into something in production when we fully understand the risk and we fully understand that we've mitigated the risk to an acceptable measure. Right. I think the other part of hype maybe is that we're early stage. And so based on what you have access to, certain LLMs, we might be using a sledgehammer to hang up a picture. Right. And so right now, early experimentation might be with some of the more expensive, very large, powerful models. I think we'll end up figuring out how to offer the business a mix of models and possibly agent orchestration across that to have the right size model at maybe a more efficient cost perspective to deliver that. From a hype positive, it's a great time to be in data, right? It's very exciting. We're now really adding, not that we didn't add value to the business, but we are now a conversation, right? Data is an enabler, not just something to control and manage. And so there is much more willingness with the business partners to talk about their data risk. This is an opportunity to really discuss data literacy and to combine that with AI literacy. Again, I think Preeti mentioned about board education. I think that needs to be more broader across all the firms. How do we get everybody who's thinking about doing something with this technology, and eventually it'll be ubiquitous, how do we make that more informed, better decision-making to identify that risk? And then, I think it's exciting to think about how this might help us do our jobs, right? I think there's a lot of opportunities within data management itself to think about how we could scale faster, do more, control more, govern more than what we're doing now with this technology.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I don't know if Gord or Chris, do you have any comments regarding, how is the hype around AI sort of impacting the discussion decisions you're seeing in your company?
Yeah, we are extremely optimistic about it within our organization. We've started our data journey. And so we've applied data science more aimed at generating insight across our leadership team. So more of an exploration and discovery aspect. What we've finding where we're having some success is we're starting very small and being quite deliberate on how we're going to use AI for our internal teams first. Why that's incredibly important for us is a lot of the data management principles, frameworks, or processes that a lot of our partner organizations that are here and represented may be at a more advanced stage than us. And so by aiming AI initiatives internally, we can pressure test our data management processes and frameworks. And we're starting very small with 20 employees and only opening up a limited small area of AI using Microsoft's Copilot. And it's really forcing us to have a very deliberate series of conversations internally around what is our enterprise risk appetite, as an example. And as part of that, this pilot group, we're bringing around a broad set of stakeholders across the organizations who may have not interacted on a frequent basis. So our enterprise risk team, our HR team, our data and analytics team, strategy, IT operations, to really have existential and philosophical conversations around AI and its use. And so we're starting small, and we're, as you pointed out, learning along the way.
Great. And Gord, any comments for me?
I'm going to reiterate all that stuff. It sounds like I'm at your companies because we're doing the exact same thing. There's a lot of hype. There is some fear about missing out. But they want to proceed cautiously and carefully. And we also have a small pilot project, similar in nature. So it kind of feels like we're doing the right things. We're doing what other, our peers in the organization are doing as well. And so I think it's really all about understanding the risks, learning the impact, so that, you can properly leverage and gain value out of, the tools.
Great. Love that. And wanted to direct this to you, Chris. You mentioned about the AI use cases you're exploring and kind of the approach that you're taking to start to discuss them and implement them and evaluate them. I'm wondering how you have found the existing data management practices that you have in place. Like, are they helping you? Are they hindering you? And are there some data pressures or demands that your exploration of AI is surfacing or accelerating?
I think it's allowed my small but mighty team to have a greater appreciation of the data management principles and frameworks. We're starting to build that muscle. And in some places, we have those practices in place. And in other areas, we don't. And so we're looking to partners like the EDM Council and the broad range of partners there to provide us some sage advice as to how to move deliberately and allow not only our small pilot team to get more use out of AI, but how to open it up more broadly in our organization. Tactically, you think about we're a Microsoft shop. And so, you think about your tenant, and a lot of folks think about data as ones and zeros. I think you brought that up in your presentation, that data can be artifacts, images, documents. And so perhaps as we're growing as an organization, we haven't paid a lot of attention around our tenant and ensuring that if we're opening up access to our pilot participants, we're uncovering opportunities around governance, protection around artifacts through those roles. And so we're going through that right literally as we speak. And so we have a team portal where we're having dialogues literally all day around through a series of use cases to identify and expose that risk. And that's the whole point of the pilot, is to expose that risk and bridge it and overcome those gaps.
Yeah, I love how you called out what I would suggest is like the additional pressure demand on unstructured data. I mean, we've talked about unstructured data for a very long time, but I would say a tremendous focus on structured data when it comes to data management practices. And, I'm seeing as well increased focus on unstructured data and the demand for understanding quality, completeness of that data. And just wondering if Gord or Christine, you're also seeing the same kind of sort of it's not a new focus. It's just kind of increased pressure around it.
I totally agree. I think that when we think about historical data management, very focused on structured, we think about critical data elements when we're looking at regulatory reporting. If we're bringing in a bunch of unstructured documents, I don't think critical data elements are going to be our tool to really understand that, right? And so the other thing would be who owns this data. Sometimes maybe we we have record owners in records management, but that's a little different than ownership of the data itself. And so I think we have to think about that and figure out what the next model is to really govern that before we start down this path. I think the second thing, though, is most of the use cases that I'm aware of kind of cross industry, I'm on a couple different groups where we talk about what people are doing, what they're seeing, is that even most of them are retrieval augmented generation, right? So you're taking an LLM, you are adding probably enterprise data sources to augment that so it gets more accurate, fine tuning. And then you've got user input, you've got prompt after you get all that data together, and then you've got responses and potentially citations that show where you found that information. All of that is more data, right? And so we're going to have to govern that too and have a way to really understand where our risk is in that.
From GreenShield's perspective, we're an insurance provider, health and dental, and we also provide health services. So everything's unstructured, and it's not a huge problem, but it's the majority of our data sets there. So we're exploring ways to manage that properly, to ensure that it's fit for purpose. We have a lot of it that's been legacy, for years and years and years on claims and whatnot. And then on the healthcare provider side, we're dealing with doctors and medical plans and prescriptions. And so like that's all unstructured data. It's really, becoming, or it is an issue that hopefully AI and these LLMs will help us sort of really understand, get power and insights out of all that information.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and to your point you had made earlier, Christine, like not forgetting the power of AI as it relates to the data management practices and activities that we have to do, and making sure that we're thinking and leveraging that, I think is really critical and powerful for us to consider. Gord, just another question for you related to the initiatives you have in place regarding ensuring you have trustworthy AI investments. And, are you I'm wondering as well, are you leveraging any lessons learned from your data governance practices to help inform your AI governance planning?
Yeah, so we're doing that exactly. We're taking, the process that was built through our data governance program and sort of adapting it or expanding it to the AI in our models. So we're really trying to take a common sense approach to the problem or to governing it. So it really starts with, building a framework that sets the rules, sets the components for us to sort of think about and manage. We're talking about an AI charter that helps us define, our goals and processes. From a data management or data governance perspective, we're trying to integrate that process or the AI process closely into our data governance practices for quality, for lineage. The other key part of our initiative is really cross-functional oversight. So, I don't want to own, everything around AI. I think that, these tools are great for the businesses and they need to be involved in the process all the way through. Similarly, we're contemplating AI stewards or AI owners, right? That could, facilitate that governance process around that. Stakeholder engagement, is part of that. That's the steward side. And then we're working on or thinking about how to really educate everybody about usage, responsibility going forward. And then, with any good governance program or initiative, we want reporting. So we want to see how we're doing as part of it. So
I'm curious about Chris and Christine, your experience with this as well. I think for me in leading big company transformations, the people, the accountability, the way you're organized is really, really critical. And, Gord was just explaining a little bit about how GreenShield's thinking about organizing themselves between, and what I've seen is you start to create a data community rallying around your data, and then you have these AI people who are kind of related, but often different people. So just curious if you could share sort of how you're thinking about organizing people, accountabilities, bringing them together when it comes to, people that are working on data management, data governance, and people who are looking after AI governance or AI in general.
Yeah, in full transparency, in the beginning, it was very haphazardly. And so and lots of reasons for that. You mentioned RAG and NLP. We were having some of those proof of concepts to generate momentum and tons of excitement. We have some good champions internally that want to go pretty quickly. And then the third aspect for us that really started to apply pressure was the proliferation of AI in our applications, Microsoft products, Adobe Experience Manager, Salesforce, you name it. So getting a handle around that was super important. So we rallied around that and put in a governance framework that has broad representation. And we're pulling forward those use cases of how it's being used to document them within the organization. So at least leadership has line of sight into what's taking place and to minimize as much of that risk as possible. And so that's how we're attacking right now through a governance process with our AI working committee. But no doubt, it's not. I would suspect we're going to move to your type of model that Gord was mentioning.
I'll just add one thing. I think I don't want to lose sight. I've been in business roles, a line CDO, and this is actually my first enterprise role. I don't want to lose sight that an AI use case is a business use case, right? And the business absolutely owns the risk, right? And as mentioned in the other topic, there are going to be restrictions and prohibited use cases. After that, it's a business decision to really understand the risk, mitigate the risk, and feel whether it's acceptable and also responsible and ethical. Like we need to adhere to those standards. So we already have all of these disciplines in different ways. I think we need to figure out, do we do them in the same order that we do them today? Like, do we start at a different place and ask different questions first before we get into, say, model risk? How do we stack these up? And then as we look at our policies and standards of care today between all those different disciplines of model, tech, information security, data, do we have to spend a little time harmonizing those, so that there's clearer boundaries where one starts and stops with the specific aspects of Gen AI? So from a business perspective, it's not overburdensome, right? It's not too difficult or contradictory or who's supposed to do what. You get an answer from this team and then that team. So I think that we'll learn how to adjust these policies to maybe work a little bit closer together when it comes to all of it coming together in a Gen AI use case.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And similarly, recognizing that we do have a lot of governance and risk management, particularly in financial services, in place already. And I think one of the biggest opportunities we have is to leverage what we have already. And just as an example, one of the things that many companies are looking at is responsible use of AI, but also responsible use of data, which I would say sometimes called data ethics. I would say, when you look at that and the types of oversight or questions that you want to be thinking about, whether it's AI governance or data ethics, if you want to call it that, some of the processes we already have in place to do review and oversight, it's like, let's add 3 questions to that exact same thing we're already doing, or let's just add this one function to that exact same thing we're doing. And I think over time with AI, it will be similar, where we may want to kick off something that's kind of special and separate because it's new and evolving. But there's often a lot of processes in place that we can just augment in a much more efficient way and still get the right level of oversight. And I think that's important to investigate and evaluate. One more question I wanted to ask. Well, I have a couple more questions, but I was just thinking about the pace of change and the sense of urgency. And having been in data forever, I would say that it feels like it's accelerated tenfold, and it was already pretty fast. So I'm wondering if you're feeling the same way, and if you can just describe kind of what is the sense of urgency and the pace that that urgency is driving, and how are you managing it? Maybe I'll start with you, Gord. Yeah.
Like I said earlier, like we do have a sense of urgency around it. But I think it's more like we need to understand and get our toes wet a little bit and, really, get a better understanding of what it means, what the benefits are, what the risks are, how much it's going to cost, those types of things. It's possible. I don't think it's, going to happen, but that we won't use any AI in the future. But like it's about that evaluation process around that. So there's an urgency to understand it and not have to catch up, but be part of the process going forward at this time.
Great, thanks.
I'll answer since the mic's in my hand, and then I'll pass it to you. I think eventually to be successful, especially in a large enterprise, that we're going to have to help put the guardrails up in a more physical way, so that the business is enabled. I use the analogy, I just want someone to build me a highway that I can drive my own car on, right? And so all of us probably are in organizations where it's fairly diverse. There's different lines of business. They have different products. They move at different speeds, different data, different risk. So I think that the center and the enterprise teams, the infrastructure, architecture, the more that we can offer the business kind of a utility function that allows the models to be exposed, that the models have been proofed, that there's dev environments, experiment environments that allow you to kind of have that constant as they become available, the business can start to then use them in a governed way. And perhaps there's services within that framework that really help you govern it as well.
I think for us, that pressure and that acceleration has really helped our organization think very differently about data. And I think that's a really healthy conversation. Using your highway analogy, when I think about these controls or governance frameworks and the principles around data management, perhaps our data science practice may not have had a full appreciation of that in terms of what we were doing in terms of generating insight. And so, but to use your highway analogy, having those brakes in place will actually allow us to go faster. But I think it's really important that we go through this process.
Yeah, and I think I say this often, that the purpose of governance is to create the guardrails on the side of the highway so you can go super fast. And often people look at it as a brake. And I think when we're thinking of it as brakes, we actually approach it in a way that creates bottlenecks versus creating safe guardrails to go fast in between on. I just have one more question, and that was just quickly, when you think about the promise of AI, and specifically when you think about the dependencies on strong data management practices that it has, what scares you the most, what excites you the most? I'll start with Christine, or Chris, you've got the mic.
But I think what scares me the most is not living up to our optimism or our ambition. I think that and I think there's the flip side to that coin, right? So there's so much information out there. There's so much momentum out there. And so I think that's not only applying pressure, but it also think it creates a really exciting space for data. And I think for everybody, given how anybody in any language can have a really good, like a conversation with a computer. And so that really democratizes data, which I think for a lot of us, that's been the goal for quite a while.
Yeah. Gord?
I think it's really difficult. Like I'm thinking long term. And so like when I really think about the applications of AI, right now we're talking about, chatbots that can help customer service, or, some really, simpler types of applications. It's when you start, applying AI to, maybe writing code and changing, key functions within your organization, your IT stack, or maybe governing security. I know that there's a lot of benefit in there, but like that's the part that kind of, I don't want to, say Terminator, but like that's what would keep me up at night.
Yeah. Christy?
I think the pace, right, is what is maybe scary, and not even the pace of which the business wants to move, but the pace at which it is naturally moving in terms of this whole industry, the model, the evolution, how people are bringing things together in really amazing ways, and how much the capability is changing quarter over quarter. It really, again, it is remarkable. But I think the exciting thing about that is I think there's so many possibilities when we move beyond even like RAG into more agent oriented. I don't know if anyone has kids that played Minecraft. So I have 2 sons. I did not teach them how to play. There was no anything, right? So I think there was a consortium with, including NVIDIA, that they got an agent to play Minecraft. It taught itself. It had a skills arsenal. And so when I started to think about that, specifically in data management, there's no shortage of work, right? We have backlogs both in technology and in data, and like bringing things into scope. How do we think about automation with this technology that would allow us to do more, to bring more into governance scope, and then free up our teams to really focus on that risk and control conversation and advising the business, as opposed to, being more of the arms and the legs to kind of actually chase lineage and, identify critical data elements and kind of do a lot of those tasks. So I think it's a really exciting time to think about how we can use this technology in our own space to be more efficient so we can be more value added.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's a good wrap for our final question, just focusing on actually all of the important and valuable skills that the people in this room need to be able to continue to bring, because there's no lack of opportunity here. Yeah.
I think we could squeeze in one question. We have all the way down there. Okay, I'm going to steal a microphone.
I'm just thinking, like, what changes to existing processes and implementation with regards to monitoring and implementation processes that are going on? What changes do you see that are going to need to take place, and are those discussions being had right now?
Yeah, I want to echo, what Jennifer said earlier. We're bolting on to existing processes. So we have, we have a well-defined framework of risk functions. In some cases, 1 or 2 more questions. In others, it's like, let's take a deeper dive, right? And so we're not trying to change the process too much, but we want to ensure that we're looking at it in a proper, organized fashion. I'll pass it on.
I think for us, we're reimagining where we can apply these processes, right? So because we're a fairly younger organization, I think we have a bit of that luxury. I
think it's also learning from the early pilots, right? And I think there's a lot of ways that you can participate in conversations. So even if you haven't gotten started, other people have in other industries, maybe that are less risky or further ahead. So, lean into educating yourself and really understanding what other people are doing and the risks that they've hit, and in ways, there are ways to build, like, we know models will hallucinate, right? So how do we reduce the risk of that? What are the ways that we can do that? And so I think that we were talking to one vendor that has a control put in place. It's a RAG style. So, it's a data quality vendor that you can now business oriented wise write some code, like write your data quality rule. It comes back with internally it's checking to see if it's even executable code, and if it matches like what data was sent over, did it make up anything? And if it's not good enough, it squashes it and asks you to kind of try a little harder to refine it. So I think we'll learn about how the controls can be put into the architecture as safeguarding against the risks that we know are present.
All right, let me ask everybody to thank our panel.